Okay, I'm not going to keep you waiting. Again, as I told Shannon, this is going to be a pretty interactive presentation. But it's going to be recorded too. Oh, there's other people joining in. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so if the people that are going to join in later, they're just going to see the recording of it. That is fine as well. So, thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today. The presentation is titled The Complete Interview Blueprint. There's some stuff after that that was like very clickbait. Probably the most clickbait thing I've ever generated in my life. But if it attracts people, that's what matters. So what we're going to do, I mean, the clickbait was like how I got into 4 medical schools first try or something like that. It's clickbait, but it's true. We'll talk about what I did. I didn't really do anything special. It's not like there's this crazy, you know, one formula for everything. This is just the approach I had. The reason I wanted to do this seminar is because when I was preparing for my interview, I found that people were giving me advice on how to do things, but they didn't really tell me what to prepare. They didn't give me like a structure. I have an example of a successful applicant's, like, I guess, structure to preparing and like how long they took and things like that. So I decided to put this together. Again, at any point in the chat, if you have any questions, any comments, concerns, anything like that, you can just type it in. It's not going to be a huge seminar, so I will be trying to answer those as best as I can. So first thing you have to know is obviously seminar is recorded, so don't say anything incriminating in the chat, please. And then again, if you want to reach out to me, I'm available on the website acceptedtogether.com. I try and get to my responses as quick as possible, but I probably won't respond if I am either on rotation or at the gym. So quick little background about myself. What I want to talk about is just get you a little idea of who I am as a person, where I studied, and some like pre-interview statistics, just so you get an idea of the person I am. Because again, if you have way higher scores, way lower scores, right, that's going to affect how you study. It's going to affect how much you have to study. So for me, I'm an immigrant to Canada. I was born in Russia. I lived in Blagodarny, Dublin, Vancouver, Calgary. And I did my 4-year degree in the Bachelor of Health Sciences program at the University of Calgary, majoring in biomedical sciences and minoring in bioinformatics. I applied once. Actually, that's on the next slide, but yeah, just a normal guy, nothing crazy going on here. In terms of my admission statistics, this is the stuff that I had before. So GPA was ranging from a 3.97, where that was the GPA I had in my school, from 3.93 to 3.99. Again, I'm not saying these things to flex. I'm just saying these things so you understand the background, right? Because again, you might be able to apply all the statistics and all the strategies and all the lessons and have the most fantastic interview, right? But if your MCAT score is like 300, it's going to be a little bit difficult, right? So just as a background, MCAT was 522 with 128 cars, then 6 interviews and 4 acceptances. So in terms of the background of some of the stuff that I discussed during my interviews and some of the things that I had available to me in my written application, these are some of the most impressive things that really stand out to me, or things that I enjoyed doing, things that I talked about, and things that I really worked hard on. So the first thing is I have a weekly radio show that I play electronic dance music on. That is a huge passion of mine, and that's something I've been doing for a couple of years. I've been an Alberta Health Services volunteer and trainer for 7 years, which is also, it's a long time. I think I started when I was in grade 9 or grade 10 or something like that. So I've been doing that. I've stopped since I've gotten in because I don't have the time for that, sadly, but that's been something I'm really proud of. In terms of research, I have no publications, right? So if you have dudes out there telling you have to have 16 publications and your name first authored in Cell, they're lying. You can get in without any publications. I think I had like an abstract or something published, but it wasn't anything crazy. So you don't have to worry about that. Again, it also depends like on your status. If you're a PhD student, you probably should have pubs, but I digress. I also led a nonprofit organization called University of Calgary for about 4 years. And then there's also just your miscellaneous stuff, right? So I was an orientation leader. I did some other volunteering stuff here and there. I had a couple jobs. I worked at chapters, things like that. So really nothing crazy. And that's just kind of giving a bit of a background on myself so you know what to expect. Now, we're actually going to get into the blueprint. And so I'm going to break down specifically, each question type, how I approached each question type. And then we'll do a little thing at the end where we'll discuss just overall study strategies, how you can gain more knowledge, how you can get information, where you can just kind of brush up on some of the more knowledge-based side of the interview. And so the first thing I want to talk about is the personal questions, right? So these are your, describe a time when you had conflict of authority, describe a time when you gave advice to a friend, whatever it may be, right? And so this is a type of question that, at least I found for me, a lot of people get confused, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of the time shouldn't actually be spent in the scenario, right? If somebody was to ask you, okay, describe a time when you had a conflict of authority, like the situation doesn't really matter, right? Most applicants have a situation. I have a situation where, I was talking with my boss at Chapters. You have a situation where you were talking to Elon Musk at Tesla, whatever it is, right? Like at the end of the day, the example doesn't matter, right? What matters is, what did you learn, right? What did you take? Because it doesn't matter how epic or crazy or insane your example is. It doesn't matter if you didn't learn and if you didn't take those lessons and apply them to your life and to your likely, or if you like, obviously you want it, your career in medical school, right? Like if you just learn have all these great experiences and then you learn nothing from them, like what's the point, right? So the way you kind of structure it, right, is give a background and a context and what you did, right? So this is important, but this shouldn't be the focus, right? Like if your response is 3 minutes, I don't think you should be taking like 2 minutes to discuss, or like 2.5 minutes to discuss the background and the context, right? Give enough background and context that you understand what is going on in the situation. After that, you discuss what you learned and some of the lessons that you took away from that, right? So I usually have about 2 lessons. And the way that I did this is, these kind of questions, if you get asked, this is your pass, right? This is when you basically can turn off your brain, right? And it's a really good way, this is a really question type where you can prepare quite easily, right? Like I had like 20 cue cards where I wrote down scenarios that happened in my life, and I wrote down the scenario, what are the possible questions it could apply for, and then I wrote down my 2 lessons, right? And that way, basically any scenario I was asked, I had a response ready, right? Given the 2-minute prep time, I need 5 seconds because I prepared completely. I had like 20 scenarios, and one of those scenarios would make sense, right? Like you never want to be in a situation where you're sitting in an interview, they ask you a question and you just kind of stare at the camera and be like, oh, I don't know. Realistically, you like in 5 seconds, this is something that can come to you. And this is the easiest to prepare. Were there questions in my interviews that I didn't know that were personal? Yeah, there was a couple, right? Like you can't prepare for everything, but 90% you can easily prepare for, right? So make sure you talk about the lessons, talk about what you learned. Maybe it's, I understood the importance of asking for help. I understood the importance of delegating responsibility, whatever it may be, right? Discuss that and then go into detail about maybe some examples from your experience, whatever it is, right? And then also some applicants like to do their applicability to medicine, right? So I think this lesson would work tremendously in the field of medicine. This is why, and that's up to you. I never did any of that. I didn't do the applicability to medicine part. I thought it was a little cheesy, but it's not a bad strategy. If you want to do it, go ahead. Next question type is your classic situational questions. Your friend got in a car crash and then your grandmother got in a car, whatever. Like, who would you choose? Like situational questions, whatever it may be, right? And so in these ones, this is a pretty simple formula, right? The problem with these ones is they're so diverse. You don't know what you're going to get. And the advice I give all applicants is just, always develop a system and always work within that system. The worst thing you could do is panic, go off script, and just kind of verbal diarrhea all over the screen, right? You don't want that. You want to have a structure, because even if you don't know what you're talking about, you're a little nervous. Once you get that structure going, you'll actually find it a lot easier to get in the groove. And when you're planning in your whatever 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever prep time you have, you can actually adjust your response to be like you actually like you have a section for each of these things, and when you're writing it down, ideas will come to you as opposed to you just like, oh, I'll just think of this scenario as like one big thing without breaking it down. All right, so the main thing and the first thing is, what is the situation? What is the issue? What is the ethical issue being proposed here, right? Like you don't want to be too on the nose. You want to be like, oh, it's a matter of patient autonomy. Like, no, you don't want to do that. but describe what's going on. Why do we care? Why is there a problem here? What is the issue, right? And then my approach, what I like to do is I outline all the perspectives, right? So when I'm writing it down, I think to myself, okay, who is involved in this scenario? It's the sister, the brother, the healthcare system, the physician, the church, myself, whatever it is, right? And that will actually allow you to go to the next step where we talk about general perspectives, right? What are the perspectives and factors we have to consider? And when you have a list of all the parties involved, you just go to each party and you think, well, how is this party involved in this case? Talk about how you would do. Is there a power dynamic there? Talk about what the mother would do. Does she have certain wishes? Does she, whatever. Talk about the healthcare system. Is it a problem of resource allocation? Is it whatever it is, right? And by outlining each perspective specifically, it really helped me get a general idea of what's going on, right? And the other important thing I talk about is the why the negative, right? I think what a lot of applicants miss sometimes is like when you have a negative prompt, right? Or like a prompt where like somebody does something bad, right? Somebody, I don't know, misses an appointment or whatever it is, right? Like you have to get to the bottom of why that is, right? Yeah, a person could have missed an appointment because they hate you, right? But also they could have missed an appointment because they have extenuating life circumstances. Maybe they couldn't afford the bus, right? Maybe they missed the bus. Maybe their car broke down, whatever, right? Like it's important to understand why people do negative things and to discuss that, right? Because a lot of conflict stems from, I would hope, from negative actions, right? And so it's important to show that you have an understanding of why these actions occur, right? It's very surface level. If you say, oh, they did bad thing, I will fix bad thing, right? But on the other hand, it's aiming to understand why, gathering more information and coming to an understanding of where that came from so that your responses and your specific actions can be structured towards that, right? So last step was obviously specific actions. And this is just whatever you decide, right? What you do, outline your plan of attack, what you do next, right? And that's basically how I handle my situational questions. The next category type is you have your quirky questions, like your weird ones, right? Where it's like, okay, I put the BVS poster because it's like, who would win, Batman or Superman, right? And now, most applicants, it's very easy to like just be lost. Like, well, why? What does this even mean, right? And so, the advice I have is just treat it like a normal question, right? You don't really care about who wins, Batman versus Superman. It's just about how you handle pressure and how you can construct a system and work within that system, right? And so my advice for these type of questions is don't panic and answer them within a system that you've created yourself, right? So, for example, for a BVS question, like who would win, Batman versus Superman? Just use a system that is like outline the issue, talk about pros of Batman, cons of Batman, pros of Superman, cons of Superman, decision at the end. That's all it is, right? In other question types, it might be draw something for me, right? Okay, well, your system for that might be to start at the top left corner, work your way down, go really specific, and then go really broad and then go really specific, right? Develop a system for that question and work within that system, because if you don't, you will have verbal diarrhea and you will not perform well, because then you will get lost. You don't know what you're talking about. You'll bounce around, you repeat ideas, and that's not good, right? Ultimately, I love these questions. When I get these questions, I love it. I love talking, and I could just pop off for like 8 minutes, right? As opposed to some people were like, oh, they get this question. It's like, oh, wow, what are they thinking? How do I talk about it? No, this is just the time to relax, make a system, and just be honest. Talk about, right, for Batman vs Superman, talk about what you know, right? Talk about whatever it is, right? Like this is your opportunity to let your personality shine, but also make sure you have a system, because otherwise you lose your train of thought. Next thing is your policy questions, right? So these are your, what do you think about the new legislation? Do you think we should have a private healthcare system? What do you think of single payer versus whatever, right? And so this is a pretty simple formula. This is tried and tested. I got this, I don't know from where. I was told this from multiple people. This is what I use. It worked well. It's a good system. First thing is outline the importance. This is the same as any other question. Why do we care? Why do we care about the private healthcare system? Why do we care about the public healthcare system? Why do we care about safe injection sites? Why does it matter, right? And then this is just like standard, discuss both sides, right? Some questions, it might be difficult. You might have a perspective that's just you think is right. But that kind of shows closed-mindedness, right? I think the most important thing you have to remember is during interviews, you are being asked about your perspectives by somebody that knows nothing about you, right? So you might come to the conclusion, I think we should outlaw grapefruits. Like they are a terrible plague in our society. Well, you might have come to that conclusion, but if you just verbalize that, your interviewers have no way of knowing how you got to that point, right? Yes, in your head, you could have had a complex analysis of all grapefruit related issues, and you thought about it on your head in both sides, but what comes out of your mouth is, I hate grapefruits, right? And so to somebody that's interviewing you, it's like, okay, well, this guy just hates grapefruits and has no depth in his personality or understanding of the issue, right? So verbalize, talk about both sides, discuss the nuances, talk and talk and talk. Again, don't pop off and talk for 8 minutes, but have enough context and just show your interviewers that you understand both sides, even if you strongly believe one side, right? It comes with practice, but you have to find the opposing side to what you believe. Now, after that, it's a matter of, create a solution and pick a side, right? And this is dependent on the question. Some don't ask for a solution, but if they do, a nice approach I like to use is the upstream downstream approach, right? So upstream, when you have an intervention, do one upstream, one downstream, maybe two upstream, two downstream, whatever. And what that means is just upstream interventions would be things like, would basically just be targeting the issue at a higher up level, while downstream intervention would be targeting the issue straight on. So for example, you have a polluted river, right? You have a polluted river, people are drinking from that river and they're dying. Okay, well, your downstream intervention is, I don't know, set up checkpoints around the river saying don't drink the water, or, closing off parks or handing out flyers to people saying don't drink the water. An upstream intervention would be to shut down the factory that's polluting the river, right? And so upstream interventions usually take longer to act, but they're sometimes, or not sometimes, I guess usually more effective. Downstream, it's quicker fix if you need a quick solution, but they might not have as big of a scope of a solution. Next one is your panel questions. So, and these are your standard. Why do you want to go into medicine? Why do you want to go into medicine? So into medical school, not nursing school? What are your weaknesses? What are your strengths? And a lot of people are like, okay, this is, what do I say? How do I? For me, these are my favorite questions as well, because they're so open-ended that they give you an opportunity to talk about something other places or other questions might not cover, right? Like, schools know you have a X whatever GPA. They know you volunteered, did all these things. They know your ethical decision-making skills, right? Tell them something new. Tell them something special. Tell them something cool about you that you value. For example, for like my question, if I was asked, why do I want to be a doctor, right? I would talk about my hobbies, right? Yeah, I would kind of bridge it into like why I want to be a physician. That's true. But like, I would talk about my hobbies, right? Because like, I don't know, you want somebody who has interests outside of medicine, who has coping strategies. I talk about my love for electronic dance music. I talk about weightlifting, whatever, right? Again, how you structure that is up to you, but just, plan out something unique. What makes you different? The question is so broad on purpose, right? It's broad, so you choose what you want schools to know. And then this is the same as your personal questions, right? You just kind of slap out like whatever 10, 20 questions on cue cards, prepare some answers, and you're off to the races. The struggle with that is sometimes you might be a little limited in or you might sound a little robotic. So don't do that. Don't write out your response verbatim, but just write out enough that when you get asked the question, you're like, okay, I can relax. I've prepared this one. I'm ready to rumble. And so that's basically it. There's other types of questions that you might run into every once in a while. There's also your acting questions. But again, that depends on the school that you get into. So I'm not going to really cover that. These are just kind of the broad ones you'd probably expect to see at most schools that you are applying to. So when it comes to background, like obviously, yes, they don't expect you to be able to diagnose, right? You're not going to get a question where it's like patient comes in with bilateral, like no, you're not going to get that. But you're going to get questions where you have to know a little some, right? You're going to have to know stuff about the healthcare system. You're going to have to know stuff about Indigenous history and whatever it is, right? This is stuff you're going to have to know. And this was my personal approach. Again, these are not like sponsored by, I'm not getting money, but these are just some of the things that I did to gain some knowledge. I'm a big reader. I was in my huge podcast phase through my interviews. So I was just kind of doing this anyway. You could take it or leave it. You could do other things, but this is the stuff that I did. I read every day. I love reading nonfiction, fiction. So that was something I love doing. There's websites out there. I can't think of any because I didn't use any that are designed for like, healthcare information, all that stuff. Really up to you. Podcasts for information. This is just kind of general stuff about science, tech, whatever it is. These are the ones I use that I love listening to. Pre-Med Years is a good one. Lex Friedman podcast, always banger, always has some amazing guests on there. Talks about geopolitics. He had Mark Zuckerberg on. They're pretty long format, but if you like listening to podcasts, you love going on walks, would recommend this guy. Northern Exposure is a podcast for Canada-focused like medicine podcast. They talk about interesting cases, all that stuff. So I would recommend listening to that. Then in terms of books that I read, I have the Pre-Med Playbook, The Ultimate Guide to the MMI, and then Doing Right. They're all classics. They're not that crazy beats. Like maybe it take you a couple days a week or something. Like it's not too bad. You can just skim these guys. But yeah, that's basically all I did, right? I took a couple courses and stuff available, like on some things that I didn't really know that well. But I think at Calgary this year, for example, like they require you to take like an Indigenous health course or something of that regard, right? So, but even if you don't for your school, like you can find free courses or videos or anything online. So it's nothing too complicated. You don't have to spend eons studying like you did for the MCAT. And the last thing is I'll talk a little bit about general practice, right? So, practice every day, right? It can be 10 minutes, right? Like I practice in the shower. I practice when I'm going for walks. I practice before I go to bed, whatever it is, right? And it's just like, think of a question and start talking, right? And it's, you got to get in that flow state. You got to get in the ability to talk and discuss basically anything, right? Like I was probably the most annoying dude in my entire friend group because like I would just pop off. People would ask me something and I'd be like, well, let me tell you, we've got like, no, you like for me, it was just something I did that allowed me to get in that zone. It was great. Like when the interviews came, I was chilling. I was talking, I was in the zone. And I got that by just kind of practicing, right? The longer you practice, the better you'll be. Because you can get all the knowledge in the world, but it's also about execution. And the next thing is practice with people that don't know you. This isn't a piece of advice I give to most people, is that like, you might say something out of pocket during interview practice. And your friend knows you don't believe that. And so they'll just kind of go over that. But the problem is the interviewers are not your friends. They know nothing about you. So what you tell them is what they believe about you, right? Practice with people that don't know you. Like there was a dude at the gym I met, and I was like, bro, like you were in my classes, right? And he's like, oh yeah. I was like, you applying to med? He's like, yeah, let's meet up. So we met up and we had a practice session. We had like 4 or 5. The best practice I've had in my life, right? Like with him, he knew nothing about me. I knew nothing about him. And so he was able to give me feedback about the things I said without the context of whatever it is that was with any confounding factors of what he might not have known about my life previously, right? And then mix it up, in a day, do some questions, do some reading, do some scenario writing, right? Write down your personal experiences, whatever it is, right? Let's mix it up. This is a long haul. It's a long process, and you can't cram for this, right? Day, spend 10 minutes a day, an hour a day, whatever you have. This is a long process. Okay, so that's basically it. Like in terms of the blueprint, this is all I had to offer. Again, I doubt there was anything like mind-blowing that would like completely change your study strategies, but this is something that I did. I found to be very effective for me. And I was nervous when I came to the interviews, but I felt ready. Like I went to those things and I was like, I did as much as I can. If I studied any more, I wouldn't have gotten in anywhere else. Right. This is all I needed. So Again, this is a shameless plug, but these are all my packages that I offer on acceptedtogether.com. I am a little booked up at the moment, so please send me a message before you buy anything, because I'm not able to help you. But if you want to reach out, get some help, get some advice, get a study session going, here are my packages. I offer up to 6 hours of prep at a time. Anything more than that, and I start losing my mind. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today for this session. I hope it was useful. And I will open up the floor to any questions that anybody has about anything I said or the application process in general. Go ahead, Shannon.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, first of all. I wanted to ask you about the panel interviews. During those panel interviews, well, I've been hearing it's a lot of personal questions, but I know you can't answer like what came up, but when you had to address ethical questions in panel interviews, how did your approach differ in comparison to MMI? Because I know you don't have like 8 minutes to answer a question that they pose.
You have an ethical question in a panel.
Yeah.
I mean, your approach is the same, right?
Okay.
It's just you have less time to think.
Okay. And then in
Right.
terms of how long you actually speak for.
I mean, it depends on the context, depends on the school you interview at. In a panel, I keep it about the same. Like when in an intro question, I usually went like 3 to 4 minutes ish. Right. And yeah, for panels, it's a little bit more like, I think you have to kind of take the social cues, right? Because you don't just kind of blast on for 8 minutes like an MMI. So I'd say just keep it the same. 3 to 4 minutes is a pretty good response time. You can do less, you can do more, just read the room.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? This is your chance, guys. Otherwise, I'm charging. You have free questions. Okay. There's something in chat, maybe? No. Okay. Okay, going once. Going twice. Okay, cool. Well, that should be the end of that. I hope you found that useful. And for those that are applying this year or interviewing, best of luck. For those that are here just because they want to be, that's weird. But I welcome you nonetheless. And hopefully a couple of you will be joining the Calgary class next year. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.